Okay, I'm going to combine chapters 8 and 9 into one video here, and I hope it's not too long. But we're talking about, we start with chapter 8, where we're talking about marketing channels and how we can use those to create values for customers. And we see it's about what we call time-based competition. You know, customers want stuff and they want it right then. If I go to Best Buy and they don't have what I want and they say, well, I can order it for you and be here in a week, I say, forget that. I can order it. I can go out to my car, order it on my phone from Amazon and have it here tomorrow. So really getting stuff, but then if I keep too much stuff on hand, that inventory is very costly to me. So the longer it sits in inventory, the longer it's eating up my resources, and that's money I don't have available for other things. So it's a very, very tricky thing, and it's an increasingly important part of both manufacturing and merchandising, to have the inventory there when you need it, but not before you need it. And so if you don't have it there, you lose sales. If you have it there too long, you are losing opportunities and it's costing you money. So companies spend a lot of time and money trying to make this process as efficient as possible. So we'll talk in this one, the marketing channels at the simplest form is just a producer straight to the consumer. So if you're at a farmer's market buying something or at a craft show, it's going right from the producer to the consumer. Most other transactions, though, will involve an intermediary, who are somewhere between the producer and the consumer. And so these intermediaries perform services for both sides that add value for the customer or make things easier for the producer. And so they help with these four things: time, form, place, and ownership. And so we'll kind of talk about each of these. The producer will use intermediaries because he's trying to get more customers, and so sometimes the intermediary can open up new channels to him, new customers. Sometimes it's not getting more customers, or sometimes it's just a matter of getting the right customers. Maybe the right customers aren't in his geographic area, or he just can't get to them, and so an intermediary can help with that. The other things that intermediaries provide are marketing, guidance and expertise, shipping and handling services, that kind of thing. Maybe the producer needs credit, so the intermediaries provide credit to producers. But all of these things are really services to the producer to help them in getting it to the end consumer. So the retailer or the intermediaries, that's why a producer, it would be cheaper for a producer to go straight to the consumer. But because intermediaries form all these services to producers, that's why they're willing to take a little less profit, because a lot of times it means they'll get more sales or be able to save costs elsewhere. So a marketing channel is just a group of organization selling and promoting the good. So these are going to be, again, in between the producer and the consumer. And the supply chain, which we talk about a little bit more in chapter 9, is everybody involved in delivering it. So this will go, the supply chain will go what we call upstream to the consumers and downstream all the way to suppliers and that kind of thing. Whereas the marketing channel is more just kind of upstream, kind of just pushing that forward to the consumers. So the main two types we see in the marketing channel are these are the intermediaries. Oops. Intermediaries here would be wholesalers and retailers. And so this slide kind of outlines some of the processes that they give to you. They can buy things in large quantities and then they can break it down. It's called breaking bulk. They buy them in bulk and then break them up and sell them to so that can be a huge help for a smaller retailer, but also it allows the producer to sell still in large bulk, and then the wholesaler will be the one to break it down. So wholesalers go from the producer to the retailer. A retailer goes to the consumer, either straight from the producer or from a wholesaler. So wholesalers don't sell right to consumers, they sell to other retailers. Some of them take title to the goods, and so that kind of assumes the risk of selling it, which is a big relief for the producer. If it doesn't sell, it doesn't matter to him. He's already been paid for it. And we'll talk about the 3 different types there. A retailer buys stuff from either wholesalers or distributors or directly from the producer and then sells them to consumers. So we'll talk about the different types of retailers as well. So the 3 different types of wholesalers that we have: a merchant wholesaler is a kind of a full service wholesaler. They probably operate warehouses, they maintain inventory, they have warehouses where they keep stuff. So that would be a full service one. They're actually of different levels here. They probably supply credit to their buyers, which are retailers. There are also limited services ones that don't do quite that much. Same way within a retail, how you'll have full service retailers, and then some are more self-service. And generally, again, those have lower prices because they're not offering as many services. A broker is somewhat, so these guys up here will take title. They actually purchase the goods and then resell them, whereas a broker doesn't take ownership. I have a new tablet and a pen, and I feel like it's not writing as well, but we'll see. Doesn't take ownership. They're just they get the buyer and seller together. So kind of like a real estate agent would be that. They don't purchase it. They just kind of negotiate the sale. Negotiate. I don't think that's negotiate between the buyer and the seller. So again, much like a real estate agent. And then a manufacturer sales office, they perform warehousing or wholesaling services, but just for one firm. So this is a business-to-business kind of thing, and they just work for one manufacturer. Car dealerships might have that kind of thing, or not dealerships, sorry, but manufacturers. Types of retailers, you're probably familiar with a lot of these. Supermarkets, like a grocery store, they're self-service ones, so they don't provide full service, but they have, a range of products. Convenience goods are generally going to be a little bit higher price, and it's all about location with those. Specialty stores will just sell one type of product, but then they have a deep line in it. So a sporting goods store, or a bookstore or a shoe store or anything like that. So they just have one type of thing, but they have a lot of them. Whereas a department store has a wider variety, but not as deep, usually, because they're carrying so many things. A superstore is an oversized department store, lots of stuff, plus groceries. So this would be like the Targets with the grocery stores, or a Walmart with the grocery store and that kind of thing. Warehouse clubs, that would be like Sam's Club or something like that. Off-price retailers, those would be like TJ Maxx or what's that other one over there? Marshall, something like that, that sell a variety of discount things. Outlets operate under a brand of a single manufacturer. So we have the outlets there in Hagerstown. That would be the perfect example of that one. A lot of times it's mistakes, but sometimes I don't think it is. Sometimes I don't even think they're that cheaper. Online retailers, so there's plenty of those. Like a lot of stores have both. They have a brick and mortar store and an online, or so you've got some stores that are strictly online, like Amazon or something. Used retailers, maybe Second and Charles is a used bookstore, or thrift stores, or any kind of thing like that. Pop-up stores are temporary things. It might be like a kiosk that opens up in the mall around Christmas, or it might be, you know, those at Halloween, those ones, they pop up into empty store spaces where somebody else has moved out or hasn't been rented, but they're just very kind of temporary thing to try to. So it's either just a seasonal thing, or they pop up temporarily to try and generate some regular or some new business. There's also non-store retailing. So there's door-to-door sales, which you see less of, but you still see like magazine kind of a thing. Party selling, so like 31 parties or Solpata jewelry parties, and there's a million of those now. And those are actually really successful because, you know, you get these people, then people feel obligated to buy something because their friend's having a party, and so that actually sells a good bit. Selling via catalogs. A lot of times people don't buy from the catalogs, but the catalog stimulates an online purchase. There's a lot of that. So that's why companies still, you know, people look at the catalog and then they go online to purchase it. And a lot of people do that. And a lot of online sales are still started through the catalog. So that's why people spend the money for that. Or selling via TV. So you've got infomercials, you know, that kind of thing. Or those shopping channels. QVC and Home Shopping Network and that kind of thing. And then the telemarketing where you call and try to get a sale like that. That's tougher with the do not call registries, so you see a little bit less of that now, but they still try. And some of these guys would also apply to nonprofits as well. They still use those. Disintermediation is a situation where intermediaries are being cut out. And so, again, they do it to save money, right? Because the more people you have between the producer and the consumer, everybody in there is taking their cut. And so if we're trying to cut costs to the consumer, you know, if my product is a little bit cheaper, I'll increase sales. I do it this way. So I'm trying to improve profits. There is an increasing trend toward that. The internet makes it easier to reach these people, but it's not always going to be the best. So there are plenty of times, again, when the intermediaries are performing a service. So we have to, if you take that out, then you have to do that yourself. And sometimes we can't do that as well. But a lot of times when firms are trying to lower their costs, this is one of the first things they do. So it is a trend there. Some international things. Sometimes, you know, again, if you're going into a less developed country, they might not have an intermediary system. Sometimes here, intermediary is even more important to get somebody that understands how things work in that business. And if you don't know the process, it can be very difficult to be successful there. So there's different ways to kind of do that and different ways to get involved. And those can be even more important if you're going into a market that's very different than your own. So channel functions, the marketing, communication, and promoting the brand. So there's the push strategy, where the manufacturer gives incentives to the resellers, to the wholesalers and the retailers, to push at the customer. So when you see displays that they have up in the store, you know, that's to kind of push it. Or if they offer incentives to salespeople in the store. So, you know, let's say I go into Best Buy to look at a TV and I don't really have a strong brand preference. They might push me towards a certain brand because they get incentives and win things if they sell this many LG TVs or whatever it is. So you're pushing it through the system from the manufacturer to the consumer. A pull strategy, the manufacturer goes directly to the consumer so that the consumer contacts the retailer and says, hey, I want this brand. And then the reseller goes to the manufacturer. So it's really whether the manufacturing efforts are aimed at the reseller or at the consumer, and then I pull it through the process that way. Channel functions, what they do, again, this is the sort and regroup. This is what we talked about with the breaking the bulk part, and they buy it. Wholesalers and distributors will, that's pretty much what we're, wholesalers and distributors will buy it in bulk and sell it. And so that's, they store inventory, which again, for a small business that doesn't have a lot of space, can help it. They can help distribute. Sometimes they have their own trucking systems or the warehousing systems. Again, sometimes they take ownership, which means if it doesn't sell, they're the ones left holding the bag. So that lessens the risk on the producers and the retailers. Sometimes they extend credit, and they share marketing information. They can be a really good source of information, especially to a growing business, because they're out there, they know what's going on in different industries, and they can really provide a lot of information to you on what your competitors are doing or what consumers are saying, and so they have a big source of information, and make sure it's available to the customers when they want it. They can really help with that process, and we talked at the beginning of this chapter about how important that is. So this is what they do. Again, with this increasing push towards disintermediation, they really need to emphasize these and figure out what their retailers value, and so and producers, and really make sure they provide that in there. So this is what they do, and they just have to continue to add value to the process to make it worth that cut in there, so they don't get cut out. So when I'm selecting the channel that I want to do this, I have to look at, for my business, what is the type of consumer? Am I selling to consumers or businesses? How do they prefer to get it? Do they want to shop online, or do they want to go and look and touch this first? What type of product I'm doing? Is it perishable, which means time is really important? Is it valuable or fragile, which again means it's riskier the longer it's in shipping? And then what can my channel partners do for me versus what can I do myself? And what markets can they reach, and can they help me reach not just more, but the right markets? So these are all things that I need to think about when I'm deciding if I need intermediaries and which ones I want to use. The intensity of the distribution. So intensive distribution is where I'm trying to get it out there in as many stores as possible. Whereas selective distribution is when I'm only selling it at certain places. Sometimes for marketing purposes, I want to make it a little hard to get. The opposite of then would be the exclusive, which is, you can't get a Rolls Royce in Hagerstown, right? They're very, very exclusive. And that plays into the image that they have built for their product. So this is, again, we're talking about one of the 4 Ps, the place, but all 4 Ps have to go together. So if I'm promoting this as a really high quality product, I would not want intensive distribution. If I'm promoting it as a really good value, then I do. So this has to fit in with the other 3 Ps, we'll say. Channel power is another thing. Sometimes somebody emerges through this channel as a leader, and they get to kind of call the shot. So category killers have a big channel power, but sometimes the retailer has the power, sometimes the manufacturer has the power, and it kind of depends on what's going on. So Walmart, for example, is so huge that they can tell their manufacturers, okay, I want you to, I know that you produce this water in packs of 6 12-ounce bottles for everybody else, but I want 8 10-ounce bottles instead. And that's very expensive for the manufacturer to have to change everything just for this one customer. But if Walmart makes up 70% of my business, I can't afford to lose that 70%. So I have to suck up those extra costs. So Walmart, because they're so big, as the retailer, has a lot of power. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the manufacturer that. And so it really, if you've got something that somebody else wants, or if you're just really big, then you can get to call the shots and say what you want, and they pretty much have to do it or lose that business. Conflict obviously can arise among different channel members. They all have their own goals, right? Producers can compete with different channel members. So, and everybody's, especially if you're doing that push strategy and you're trying to get them, you want the good shelf space for your product. Like grocery stores, for example, everybody wants to be on the eye level aisle, and how you get that. And so, it can be, sometimes it's too, like, again, manufacturers are selling it online, which is cutting, if people sell it online for cheaper than that they're selling it in the store, like say I'm selling it through Amazon for cheaper, then that can really create some conflict too. I don't want you to sell it through there. So I was just reading a thing about how Target doesn't sell the Kindle anymore because they don't sell Amazon products, because they kind of got mad when Amazon was pushing the idea that you can go to a store, scan in the barcode, and find it Amazon cheaper and just order it for your phone. I think it's called showcasing. So you go look at it in the store, make sure that's the one you want, but then you don't buy it from that store. And so the store's absorbing all the costs for the overhead and the inventory and all that, and then you go and buy it. I mean, I'm guilty of it. But that's really, really, really tough on retailers. And so when Amazon was encouraging their customers to do it, Target's like, hey, that's really not nice. And so they stopped carrying Kindles. I think that's true. It seemed like a good article that I was reading, but I just saw that once. But you can see the idea behind that one. Channel integration is, so, there's all kinds of things to get people to cooperate within the channel. And again, kind of keeping, try to, so that hopefully it turns into a win-win. But sometimes channels kind of integrate. So vertical integration is when different members up and down the channel integrate. So it could be a manufacturer and a shipping company, or a manufacturer and one of their suppliers, or something like that. So let's say a manufacturer buys out a supplier. So that was somebody I bought from, and now I buy it. So that's vertical integration. And then horizontal integration is when two manufacturers of the same thing integrate, or two shipping companies, or two suppliers, or something like that. So those are different types of integration that you see through the channel. And it does kind of reduce competition, so mergers and that kind of thing have to be approved by the FTC and all that type of thing to make sure that everything's still fair. The other the other PowerPoint that was posted in there, I went through some kind of trends and developments in retail, and they're not on the quiz and they're not even from this book, but I thought they were fairly interesting. So you can take a look at those if you have time. And then that brings us to Chapter 9, where we're talking more about those supply chains and how we can use that to create value for our customers. So the supply chain is a little bit different. Again, the marketing channel was just kind of downstream, just to the customer part. But this can go upstream and downstream. So we can be going backwards to suppliers or forwards to customers, and kind of moves in both directions. There is the supply chain. And so anybody involved, anyone from the supplier all the way to the salesman, any of that kind of thing is supply chain. So some issues that we talk about in there are sourcing is how we find and evaluate suppliers. Procurement is how we buy the stuff necessary, so purchasing and that kind of thing. You might have something similar where you work. With the sourcing, outsourcing is when we have somebody else provide it. So sometimes they can provide more value. Outsourcing isn't the same as offshoring. So sometimes they can provide more expertise, the more value, more effectiveness. So a lot of people outsource their payroll functions or their accounting functions. If you're not a big company, then it's really hard to have all this expertise in-house. And so if somebody else can do it more efficiently, then that can generally provide value. So like I said, a lot of times somebody else can do it better, so it makes sense to outsource those and focus on what you are good at. So again, if it provides value, and again, saving money is providing value, or just making sure it's better. So this is the types of things that were offshore. Now, outsource just means I have somebody outside my company do it. Offshoring means I have somebody in another country do it. And so you can see the types of things. So manufacturing, warehouse and transportation, procurement, returns, and customer service. A lot of places when you call customer service or tech support or something like that, it ends up, your call is getting outsourced or offshored to somewhere else. And so rather than maintaining all that stuff in-house, these are the types of things that people are tending to offshore more. The risks of outsourcing. Once you do it, you lose control over that. So you are no longer in control of the quality or the safety. If it's manufacturing, it could be safety related. Anything is quality. But think about call centers. A lot of that's off outsourced now or offshored, and they're not going to care about your company quite as much as you do. If they're manufacturing the same thing for 5 different companies, you're not, and so it's not as important to them as it is to you. The quality is another one. A lot of people offshore to save money, and then it ends up being a lower quality. So that's again, the safety requirements in other countries isn't the same. So if you're offshoring it, you have to make sure they're maintaining your same safety standards. Some other things are the logistics of transporting it. The workforce policies in third world companies, that becomes very, very tricky because sometimes you're like, well, the working conditions aren't as good, and so if you don't send, it's complicated because we can't assume that the living conditions and the working conditions in other countries are exactly the same as they are here. And so it is cheaper, but anyway, so I know it's not as good there, but maybe it's still a good job for them. And so is it good or bad? That's a very complicated issue right there. But it is something to consider. And some of these types of concerns, people have had problems with quality or ideas being stolen, that kind of stuff, and then you end up seeing them bringing it back in. So there's a little bit of trend towards that. Also with supply chain, it's very important with forecasting. We talk about demand planning, estimating how much I'm going to have to buy. So I estimate sales and I work it backwards. I make my production my schedules off of that, and kind of say, all right, and how much time is it going to take me? And you have to be much, much better at this than you used to. So when we fell into the recession in 2007 and 2008, a lot of people, if they'd just been looking at the past production, would have greatly overproduced. So you have to look at what you've done in the past, but you also have to try and keep an eye on the future so that you don't end up short or over, because again, that could be very costly. It's not easy to do, but it is kind of important there. So supply chain managers and marketing managers and salespeople all look together to generate these forecasts. Again, it should start with the sales forecast and work backwards through the system, and then you plan that backwards. Okay, I'm going to need the shipping people ready here, and I'm going to need the production here, and so I'm going to need to purchase it, and kind of work backwards there, and really trying to make this information visible to everybody. Inventory control is the process of making sure that you have an adequate amount of products to meet your customer needs, but again, hopefully not more than you need. And then the chapter also went on to go through quite a few different terms related to inventory, just kind of basic vocabulary terms there that you can probably handle yourself. How we track this stuff, again, companies spend a lot of money on inventory control systems and inventory tracking systems. And the only reason they're willing to spend that much money is because the increased efficiency saves them even more money. So if Walmart's going to spend $1 billion on revamping their inventory system, it's because it's going to save them more than that. So huge numbers here. Electronic product codes are, you're probably used to seeing like a barcode. A barcode might be the same for everyone a product. An electronic product code is like that, but a little more specific. So I can tell this TV from this TV, not just at the same type, but I know this specific TV down to the serial number and this one. And RFID tags is what along these lines. This is kind of what we're talking about with the activity or the discussion for this week. But this is a radio signal, and there's a couple videos here that you can kind of take a look at. They're really pretty interesting, but they can just scan like a whole palette of products all at once and know everything that's in there, and they don't have to. A lot of times they have kind of a machine that'll manually scan it in there, so they don't have to. So it can save them huge amounts of time and make their information really much more precise and efficient. some people freak out about that a little bit. They think, if I have clothes that was RFID, then it's tracking me. But it's really not, because it has to be within a few feet of the reader, and then it can't track you after that. So, not that it can't be built that way later, but that's not how it's being used right now. But you can take a look at those videos. They're kind of interesting, or ones from the discussion. So, if you chose RFID, or even if you didn't, after you post your discussion, you can go back and read other people's and see what kind of articles they found about that and how it affects different people throughout the supply chain. Warehouses and distribution centers. We have to, and where we live here, right at the intersection of 81 and 70, we have lots and lots of warehousing things. You can have these gigantic ones, and you can have, I think Amazon was moving from big gigantic ones to more, instead of a couple huge ones, to a bunch of smaller ones, because then it gets a little bit closer to these things. And a distribution center that has that, but then also has the trucking there kind of with it, processing and moving them to anybody rather than. So this is more on storage, and this is more on shipping, moving it. The distribution center is on moving, and this is more on storing. A lot of times they're both, and you see stuff here, but Amazon, I think, is genius at really this whole process, and that's how they can get stuff here in a day, and accurately predicting that. I still don't know how they do it, but transportation is also part of the supply chain process. So logistics is the flow of materials, and again, it's becoming more and more and more data driven to be more and more efficient. Trucks, almost everything has to come by truck at some point. So trucks are very important. Water is big for international because it's the cheapest way to get things here internationally. Air can be used internationally, and so it's used for time-sensitive things, but it can be very expensive. It's a very high cost. So if it's not time-sensitive, more likely if it's international, it'll come by water. Railroads, they fall somewhere in between. Again, especially if you're going over land, it's going to be cheaper than air, but not quite as fast as air. And then pipelines are used for like natural gases and chemicals and those types of things. So those are also, water would be cheaper, air would be the most expensive, and these rest of them fall somewhere in between there. And then I think the last thing in here is reverse logistics, which is running things backwards through the supply chain to get value. So stuff that, turn trash into cash, stuff that would have just been byproducts or trash to try to get something out of that. It's greener, upscaling is kind of like that. I have a video here, zoos take, animal waste and make stuff out of it. Sometimes it's just fertilizer. I saw paper made of elephant poo before, but there's all kinds of things like that where people took stuff that so they might promote it as being green, but really it's to increase their profits. Well, and if you can do both, that's both at the same time, then that's a win-win. But there's an increased, rather than just trashing the stuff, what can I do with this and increase the value in there somewhere. So there you go. There's chapters 8 and 9.